War isn't just blood and bullets, it's a grind of terrifying labor, haunting silence, and jobs so dangerous they felt like death sentences. Welcome to EyeRich History, where we uncover the stories that textbooks buried deep. Today, we're dragging into the light 7 of the worst, most grueling, most horrifying jobs of the Civil War. And trust me, these aren't your ordinary battlefield tales. Some were trapped in steel coffins beneath the ocean. Others faced cannons armed with no more than a flag. And one fixed a live fuse on 4 tons of gunpowder that could have exploded in his face at any second. You won't believe number 4, and once you hear it, you'll never forget it. Ever wondered what it was really like beneath the muskets and medals? What brutal behind-the-scenes jobs did soldiers dread the most, and why were they so crucial to the outcome of the war? How do you serve your country when that service means cranking a hand-powered propeller inside a sinking submarine or carrying a flag straight into enemy fire with no weapon to defend yourself? Stick around, because the truth about these Civil War jobs is darker, deadlier, and more unforgettable than anything you were taught in school. Imagine crouching in a pitch-black, 4-foot-high steel tube deep underwater. It's cold and cramped. The air is thick, and your only light is a flickering lantern. Suddenly, water starts leaking in. No way out. You're not a soldier dodging bullets or cannonballs, you're a submariner in the Civil War. And this isn't even the worst job on our list. The kind of jobs history textbooks glance over, where young boys handled explosives, flag bearers were guaranteed targets, and one wrong step meant instant death. This job number 4, it's not just shocking, it was considered a suicide mission, wrapped in innovation and desperation. By 1861, the United States was tearing itself apart. 11 southern states tried to violently secede, forming the Confederate States of America, sparking a war that would kill over 620,000 Americans. Most imagine the Civil War being fought on open fields with muskets and cannons. But beneath the surface, literally, a terrifying new kind of warfare was taking shape. The Union's attempt, the USS Alligator, was powered by wooden oars. Yes, oars. A 47-foot-long underwater coffin that never saw combat because it sank in a storm before completing even one mission. But the Confederacy? They doubled down on disaster. They built the H.L. Hunley, a steel tube forged from an old boiler. Crammed inside its 4-foot-high hull were 8 men, shoulder to shoulder. One steered. The other 7, like human hamsters, cranked the propeller by hand. It was brutal, cramped, suffocating, and deadly. On its first 2 missions, the Hunley flooded and sank, drowning 13 of the 16 men who served aboard. But the Confederates weren't finished. They raised it, repaired it, tried again. In 1864, the Hunley made history, becoming the first submarine to sink an enemy ship, ramming a spar torpedo into the USS Housatonic, a 20-foot pole with an explosive at the tip. Boom! The Union ship sank. But so did the Hunley. The explosion killed everyone aboard again. Some called it heroism, others called it madness. But of the 24 men who ever served aboard the Hunley, only 3 survived, a terrifying experiment cloaked in desperation and one of the worst jobs in Civil War history. And that's only job number 4. You think your job is tough? Stick around as we uncover the real-life horror of the Civil War's most dangerous duties. Before we jump back in, drop a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. And if this video hits you, if it reveals something you were never taught, make sure to subscribe, tap that notification bell, and share this history with others. Because what's coming next is something special I've saved just for you. Let's dive into the untold side of the Civil War, stories of bizarre tech, brave kids, silent submarines, deadly flags, and sky-high scouts. These are the parts of history that textbooks left out. Let's start with job number 7, Subpar Submarine. In 1861, 11 pro-slavery states attempted to violently secede from the United States and form their own nation, the Confederate States of America. The Union states in the North fought to prevent this, igniting a full-scale conflict that resulted in approximately 620,000 American casualties. While the Civil War was primarily fought using muskets and cannons, it also saw remarkable technological experimentation, including the introduction of primitive submarines by both sides. In 1862, the Union launched the USS Alligator, a 47-foot-long submarine powered by wooden oars. However, the vessel never saw combat. It sank during a storm before completing even one mission. The Confederates achieved slightly more with their own vessel. The H.L. Hunley is a small cylindrical sub capable of traveling 30 feet underwater. Made from a repurposed steel boiler, the Hunley's cramped 4-foot-tall interior forced its 8-man crew to crouch. One crew member would steer, while the other 7 turned a hand crank to rotate the propeller. Serving in such a confined, dark, and hazardous environment was unpleasant and, unsurprisingly, extremely dangerous. On its first 2 missions in 1863, the Hunley flooded and sank, killing 13 of the 16 sailors aboard. Still, the Confederates persisted. After raising and repairing the Hunley a 3rd time, they launched a mission in 1864 that was slightly more successful. The Hunley became the first submarine in history to sink an enemy ship when it approached the USS Housatonic and struck it with a spar torpedo. This weapon, a bomb affixed to a 20-foot pole, detonated on impact with its target. Though the attack destroyed the Union ship, the Hunley was caught in the explosion's blast radius and sank as well. The Confederacy never recovered the wreck, and perhaps that was for the best. Of the 24 men who served aboard the Hunley over its short lifespan, only 3 survived. Crouching in that pitch-black steel shell as it took on water must have been absolutely terrifying. Hot scare balloon. Today's Air Force pilots operate advanced fighter jets, but air warfare during the Civil War was significantly more rudimentary. In 1861, an inventor established the Balloon Corps, a branch of the Union Army that observed Confederate troop movements from hot air balloons. Surveying battlefields from hydrogen-filled balloons was extremely risky. The balloons were tethered to the ground and remained largely stationary once airborne, making them easy targets. Confederate forces frequently opened fire on them using muskets and cannons. Pilots flew at altitudes of about 1,000 feet to avoid musket fire, and the balloons made of silk could withstand musket balls. However, Confederate artillery and cannons could fire as far as 2,000 to 5,700 feet. A direct hit from a cannon would have been fatal for the pilot. Fortunately, Civil War cannons were notoriously inaccurate, and no Union balloons were actually shot down during the war. Ironically, the balloon ground crews were often at greater risk. The clearly visible tethers made them easy targets, and Confederates could simply aim at the base of the ropes to hit the crews. In one instance, in 1862, Union General George McClellan was nearly struck by cannon fire while overseeing a balloon launch. Whether dodging shrapnel in the air or explosions on the ground, serving in the Balloon Corps was a nerve-wracking experience, truly a job with its ups and downs. Capture the flag. If World War II ever came calling, I'd want the best armor and weapons available. But in the Civil War, some soldiers, both Union and Confederate, went into battle unarmed, carrying only a flag. To maintain order on chaotic battlefields, each regiment had a color bearer who carried the unit's flag during charges. Soldiers used the flag to stay together and follow their formation. However, the flag's visibility made the color bearer an obvious and high-priority target for the enemy. The role was incredibly dangerous. Color bearers were not permitted to retreat, no matter how dire the situation, because their unit would follow them. If they fled, they faced execution for desertion. Due to the perilous nature of the position, color bearers had a much shorter life expectancy than regular soldiers. If one fell in battle, another soldier was expected to pick up the flag, only to become an immediate target themselves. It was not uncommon for a flag to change hands several times during a single engagement. So while carrying the flag united a regiment, it also marked the bearer for death and often left them charging toward enemy fire without even a weapon in hand. Infantry with chores. Being a kid today might feel rough with chores and early bedtimes, but growing up in the 1860s could be far worse. Both Union and Confederate armies officially discouraged soldiers under 18 from serving in combat roles, but recruiters frequently allowed teenagers to enlist. It's estimated that 20% of Civil War combatants were underage. Children as young as 9 were permitted to serve in non-combat roles, though these were still dangerous. Drummer boys were common on both sides. They stood just behind the front lines, playing drum signals to relay orders, like advancing or retreating, from officers to infantry. Although positioned behind the line, they were still exposed to stray artillery and sudden charges. The youngest known casualty of the war was Charlie King, a 12-year-old Union drummer killed by Confederate artillery during the Battle of Antietam in Maryland. The Navy was no safer. It actively recruited boys as young as 10 to serve as powder monkeys, children who carried gunpowder from storage to the cannons. Ships were cramped, so these boys were small enough to move swiftly through tight spaces, which increased the cannon's firing rate. But transporting explosive material as a child was a perilous task. One spark could end their lives instantly. Worse, they weren't even paid fairly, earning about $140 a month in today's money, just half of what the lowest-ranking adult sailors made. Fixing the fuse. On June 15, 1864, the Union launched the longest siege in American history, aiming to capture Petersburg, Virginia. For 292 days, Union forces attacked the city, but Confederate trenches just outside its borders made direct assaults difficult. 10 days into the siege, Union Lieutenant Colonel Henry Pleasants proposed an audacious plan. Dig a tunnel under the Confederate line, pack it with gunpowder, and blow the enemy up from below. After a month of digging, a 586-foot tunnel was filled with 4 tons of explosives. On July 30th, they lit the fuse. But 45 minutes later, nothing had happened. Pleasants then asked for volunteers to check the tunnel. Against the odds, Sergeant Henry Reese and Lieutenant Jacob Doughty crawled into the mine, knowing it could explode at any moment. Halfway in, they discovered the fuse had broken. They repaired it, then scrambled for the exit as the spark followed closely behind. They made it out just in time to witness a massive explosion that killed 278 Confederates and created a 170-foot wide crater. Union troops then charged into the crater, but quickly became trapped, unable to climb its steep walls. Confederate reinforcements arrived and fired down into the hole, leading to a massacre. Union forces were forced to retreat, suffering 3,798 casualties, while Confederate losses numbered just 1,491. Though Reese and Doughty's courage was commendable and Pleasant's plan was ambitious, the outcome only prolonged the siege. Petersburg would not fall for another 239 days, just before the Civil War's end. Treacherous trains. Modern armies used trucks and tanks, but in the 1860s, steam trains were the fastest way to move troops and supplies. Both Union and Confederate forces built extensive military railroads, but these became prime targets. Working as a train engineer was one of the war's riskiest jobs. Enemies frequently sabotaged tracks or attempted to raid and burn enemy trains. Trains were guarded heavily to deter these attacks. Still, in 1864, the Confederates devised a stealthier weapon, the coal torpedo. This was a small bomb coated in coal dust to resemble a lump of coal. It would be smuggled onto a Union train or steamboat and hidden in the engine's coal pile. When the engineer unknowingly shoveled it into the furnace, it would explode. The Confederacy never succeeded in placing one on a train, but in 1864 they did smuggle one aboard the Union steamboat Greyhound, sinking it. Union Admiral David Dixon Porter admitted the tactic put Yankee ingenuity to shame. Afterward, train and steamboat crews lived in fear. Each scoop of coal could be their last. Running guns. The Civil War was fought with muskets, but it was strategic planning that led to Union victory. One of the boldest Union strategies was the Anaconda Plan, a massive naval blockade launched in April 1861. Some 500 Union ships patrolled the southern coast, aiming to cut off Confederate ports. The South depended heavily on trade, exporting cotton in exchange for weapons and supplies from Caribbean islands and European allies. The blockade crippled these exchanges, and the Confederacy lacked a navy strong enough to break through. So they turned to blockade runners, sailors operating fast, low-profile steamboats painted gray to blend into the night. These daring crews slipped through the blockade on moonless nights, risking their lives to bring back vital goods. The job was extremely dangerous, but successful runners were handsomely rewarded. Over time, the South managed to smuggle in more than 600,000 rifles. Yet the Union captured over 1,100 blockade-running ships and sank more than 300. In the end, despite their bravery, the South couldn't match the North's industrial and naval power, and the blockade significantly hastened the Confederacy's downfall. The Civil War is often remembered in black and white photos, bold headlines, and names etched into marble monuments. But behind every cannon blast and cavalry charge were human beings, trapped in unimaginable roles, jobs so dangerous, so dehumanizing, they bordered on cruelty. These weren't just soldiers. They were teenage powder monkeys, dodging flaming shells, color bearers running into certain death without a weapon, balloon pilots floating in bullseye skies, and submariners entombed in metal coffins. They were ordinary people asked to do the unthinkable for a cause that, in many ways, still divides the nation. And what was the journey? It was a descent into the overlooked corners of war, where silence screamed louder than gunfire, and where glory came second to survival. It was about human grit, about young boys forced into battle, about innovation driven by desperation, and about what people will endure when the cost of failure is obliteration. Yet we must ask, what does it say about a war when some of the worst jobs weren't even on the front lines? Why do our history books glorify the generals, but leave the stories of drummer boys, death-trap submariners, and human targets untold? And here's the twist to consider, the controversy few dare to confront. Was this sheer bravery or state-sanctioned sacrifice? Were these men and boys patriots or pawns in a game played by leaders far from the horrors of the battlefield? Remember, history isn't just about who won, it's about who paid the price, and too often, those who paid the most have been forgotten. So now that you've seen the darker side of Civil War service, tell me this. If you had to choose one of these jobs, which would you take? Or more hauntingly, which one would you refuse, even if your life depended on it? Drop your answer in the comments, start the conversation, and let's keep this history alive. The real history, the kind they never taught you in school. Because here at EyeRich History, we don't just remember, we reveal. Until next time, subscribe, click that bell, and share this video with someone who still thinks war is only about battlefield glory. War isn't just blood and bullets. It's forgotten faces in the shadows and jobs that no one wanted to survive.